Go. Looks like we're live. Okay, hello everybody. I don't know if we've got anybody there, but if you are, welcome. This is Missing in Action Assemble, and for those of you that don't know, I'm Dave Hill. I'm joined by Paul McCarty and Sylvie, who are our sort of regular runners of this thing. And today we're also joined by Chana Studley, who is kindly going to be speaking to us about her experience of post-traumatic stress and chronic pain and the work that she's doing in that space. Hannah has had a very interesting career. We've just found out that when she was at university, she was in a punk rock band, which was news to me. So that's the sort of starting point. And then a period in Los Angeles working in film, and we may or may not go there. We'll wait and see what she has to offer us. And now is a coach based in Jerusalem in Israel. So I think that's probably enough from me. Hannah, I'll hand over to you.
Great. Thank you, guys. It's so nice to be here and hang out with you. Yeah, I was in a punk rock band in Manchester in the 80s when I was a student. And that's kind of like the beginning of my story because, back in the 80s, for me anyway, everybody was going to concerts and, it was all about music. And I was at a concert in a nightclub, and my boyfriend actually was in the band. So we're all dancing and having a good time. And this young man who I didn't know, I never knew who he was. He tried to dance with me, and I didn't know him, so I kind of pushed him away. And the last thing I remember is his hand on the back of my head, and he smashed my head into a concrete pillar on the side of the dance floor. And I lost consciousness. I was probably only out for, seconds. It wasn't very long. But when I came to, my head was a different shape. Like, I can put my finger right on it. It's right here where my skull was fractured. I know you can't see it, but it's kind of, like if you ever put a picture up, you can kind of tap the wall to see where it's a good place to put the nail in the wall. It's kind of like that on my skull. It's like, I know right there where the bone knitted back together. It's, it's super strong here. So when it happened, when I came to, my head was a different shape, which was quite alarming. And I couldn't see. I could only see about an inch in front of my face. And it's amazing how actually calm I was. I kind of crawled on my hands and knees through the crowd, excuse me, because a friend of mine was mixing the sound at the back of the room at the sound desk. And I pulled myself up on the sound desk. And as soon as he saw that, like, my misshapen head, he leapt across the bar, got a bucket of ice, threw it on my head, and threw me in a taxi with another friend. And we went to the emergency room. And I can remember the doctor, this is 30 years ago, but I can still remember the doctor saying, "Follow my finger." And I'm like, which one? Because I couldn't even see, and it was kind of double and blurry. And because I was a student, and alcohol may have been involved, it was just kind of one of those things that just kind of happens. And I just kind of got over it, and I went back to school and finished college, and didn't really think much about it. And then a few years after I finished college, I was still in Manchester, and I was walking home about 6 o'clock in the evening. And I was walking on a path between two council estates in Manchester, and a path that I'd walked many, many times. And because it was February, it was already dark. And all of a sudden, I can remember 3 men came out of the dark, slammed me on the ground, and beat the living daylights out of me. I can only guess they were looking for money, because they were like trying to get inside my jacket. And basically 2 of them held me down, and the other one kicked me in the head and the stomach and the chest. And I thought I was going to die. I can remember, it's funny, at different times in my life, I've remembered it differently. But for the few years afterwards, what I remembered most was the feeling of the air running out of my lungs, because I could hear myself screaming. And I remember thinking, if I can't catch another breath, I'm going to die. If they have a knife, I'm going to die. It was, I was so terrified. And it was almost like I went into slow motion as well, which I think is quite common when someone's going through something so traumatic. And they kicked and punched me for it seemed like forever. It was probably only a few minutes, but it felt like a long time. And then they ran off and left me there on this piece of waste ground, kind of between these two housing estates. And I remember lifting myself up out of the dirt, and I could see someone walking by on the other side of the road. And because, it was misty, it was dark, and I could see them under the light of the street lamp. And I can remember it just kind of compounded that feeling of isolation and vulnerability because they didn't stop. Now, I've never had a resentment of that person, because I've heard plenty of stories of people who stop to try and help, the Good Samaritan thing, who end up getting hurt themselves. So I don't blame him, but it kind of really compounded this feeling of helplessness, I think. So I picked myself up and I managed to scramble back to my friend's house who I'd been visiting, and they kind of patched me up, a cup of tea, put me in a taxi, sent me home, and that was kind of it. But the next day, I remember when I woke up, my ears were all mashed up and severely bruised and still bleeding a little bit. I remember going to the front door and having this thought: last time you left the house, they almost killed you. And then I couldn't leave the house, so I went back in, and then this went on for a couple of days, and then I ran out of food. I needed milk or something, and I was like, I got to get out the house. And again, there was that voice saying, 3 days ago when you left the house, they almost killed you. And this continued for months. Anytime I go near the front door or even try and get out, the story of what happened to me just started to repeat and repeat and repeat. And I did actually go to the police station because I thought they should know what's happening. And I remember giving a report to the detective, and he said, well, we know who did it. And I'm like, what? I mean, I almost leapt across the desk and wanted to strangle this guy, because he was like, yeah, we know who did it. I'm like, why aren't you doing something? And they're like, oh, we've got more important things to deal with. Which, again, that kind of compounded this feeling of vulnerability and not being important and, not worth their time. And I'd say for the next, 4 or 5 months, just barely left the house, reliving it. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I had this, the voices in my head were getting really loud. I think I punched the wall a few times in absolute frustration, which they probably would call self-harm these days. I mean, there was nothing, no diagnosis going on in the early 80s in Manchester. In fact, I think PTSD had only just gone in the DSM, was only just recognized as a diagnosis. So I wasn't given any kind of treatment or help. But I did, after about a year of this, my family doctor did send me to the psychiatrist at the hospital, the Manchester Royal Infirmary. And it took me about 2 panic attacks just to get there. And I remember sitting across from the psychiatrist, who wasn't that much older than me. And she asked me to tell her what happened. So I was like, okay. So I told her what happened. And then she said, tell me again. I'm like, was she deaf? Like, stupid cow, didn't she hear it the first time? So I told her again. And then I think she even asked me to tell her a 3rd time. I'm like, what's the matter with this woman? She's stupid, right? But that was her treatment. Her treatment was to get me to talk about it again and again and again. So by the time I left, I was really wound up and really in a mess now. And I think I only went back for maybe 1 more appointment because I couldn't see the point. I thought she wanted me to keep talking about it, and I could do that really well at home. Right? I needed help to not do that, So I think I don't know if I went to a 3rd appointment, maybe 2 maximum, because I really didn't see the point of going through the stress and the panic of leaving the house, and then and for what? To have someone make me feel even more miserable. So so after that, I think that's when I moved down to London. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Excuse me. And because clearly Manchester was the problem. After these 2 incidences, it gotten really bad. So I moved down to London and I started a career in the entertainment business. I started to make props and costumes in the theatre. And I was riding my bike home one night from the theatre. It was at about 10 o'clock at night. And I was in central London. And I remember riding my bike, and I saw a kid. He was about 16 years old. I saw him at the corner of my eye, and I noticed him because he was on a very small child's bike, like a BMX bike, a 5-year-old's bike. And I thought, that's weird. And the next thing I knew, the bike came flying through the air and he threw it at my head and shoulders. which because the impact was incredible, because I was riding fast to get home this way, like that way, and the bike came that way. So it was like bam, like it was like being shot out of a cannon at a brick wall. It was the ferocious, and so the impact knocked me off my bike into the path of oncoming traffic. I mean, how a car didn't run over my head was amazing, thank God. And he took my bike from underneath me. He sold it for about 50 quid the next day, which is about $70, I think. And again, I can remember lying in the gutter going, why me? Why do all these really, probably cursed quite a lot at the time, why are all these terrible things happening to me? I couldn't understand it. And again, I picked myself up. I went back to the home of some friends who I'd been visiting, and they actually found out who it was, because their daughter went to school the next day and she heard him bragging about it. He was bragging that he'd stolen a bicycle from a girl that was actually on the bike. He thought this was really funny and clever. But when I woke up the next morning, I couldn't move my head. My neck was like jelly. And I literally had to hold my head like this. And I walked into my family doctor, and my doctor moved my head around and says, oh, you're fine. And that was the only treatment I got. I bought myself one of those collars, like you see in the movies, like a surgical collar. I just felt I needed something to help me feel safe. And it's a good job I did, because about two years later, I was working on a movie in Australia. And I woke up in the middle of the night with my chin stuck down on my collarbone, and I could not move, screaming in pain. And I managed to find that there was a chiropractor in the village next to us. We were out in the bush in the middle of nowhere. And I literally walked like this down the dirt track to the next village to go see the chiropractor. And he luckily had an x-ray machine. And I remember him trying to get me to stand up. He's like, stand up straight. I'm like, I can't. I was stuck like this in absolute agony. My whole body seized up. And when he looked at the x-ray, he said, did you know your neck was broken? I'm like, what? and immediately I started having visions of, surgeries and wheelchairs and being paralyzed, forgetting that I'd actually walked in there, right? But just him saying that, just filled me with terror. And he was actually quite amazing. He saw me twice a day, I think, for the first week. He couldn't even touch me at the beginning without me screaming. And then every day, every other day, the whole time I was there on this job. And he got full movement back in my neck. But he said to me, you probably should get treatment for the rest of your life, because it could seize up again at any moment. So again, that kind of filled me with fear. So for the next 25 years, I had a monthly chiropractic appointment to keep my neck from seizing up, because it would feel like I needed some WD-40 in there quite a lot of the time. That's how stiff and crunchy and uncomfortable it would feel. And when you've been told your neck is broken, I kind of put an idea in my head that my body was weak, that I was broken, and that I needed treatment and I needed to be careful. So every time I'd move somewhere around the world, like most people, when they move, they find out where the post office is or the supermarket. I'm like, where's the chiropractor? Because I kind of had this idea that I couldn't live very long or very far without one. So that became my life. I was working in the film business and having an amazing time, flying all over the world, doing incredible things. I did special effects and having these pain flare-ups, because there was the neck problem, but there was also my lower back was always going out, is what I used to call it. Because when I was in that punk rock band, we had done a tour of Europe, and in Italy, I had fallen off a table and I fell backwards onto a marble floor onto my back and had 3 herniated discs. So between all these injuries, I was constantly having these pain flare-ups. I would have these kind of pain flare-ups where I'd be pretty much paralyzed from the chest down, not being able to move my legs, my hips, and I'd be bent sideways or bent forward. I had a walking stick at the age of 27. And I kind of knew that one of these times, maybe the feeling wouldn't come back in my legs and I'd be stuck like that forever. So the combination of the the PTSD of like reliving and reliving and reliving, you know, the event, that I kind of eventually got better from that. But then I think what happened is all the hypervigilance, you know, that is a very common symptom of PTSD. It kind of went like into my thinking, because I got into a lot of self-help programs to try and, you know, help address all this stress that I was going through. And it's almost like the self-help techniques kind of got me to be very vigilant about my thinking. And looking back, that's really how I think the pain, the chronic pain, was kept going, because the stress from all the, you know, trying to be perfect, trying not to fall apart, trying to, like, you know, keep it together, was still sending danger messages to my brain, which my brain was then interpreting as, you know, like survival mode. And so my muscles are tightened up. So no wonder my back was kept going out. I also had IBS. I had some skin problems. I had TMJ, you know, which is, you know, tight muscle, like jaw pain, eczema, psoriasis, like all kind. And I never thought of myself as a sick person. I just was having to deal with this stuff all the time. And so the back pain was the main one. And then about 7 years ago, I came across this new idea called the Three Principles. I don't know how much you guys, you know, the people listening know about this, but I was so taken with these ideas that I decided to do some training, because I'd already qualified as a life coach and done a lot of coaching work since I was in college. And I had to save some money to do the course. The course was in London, so I now live in Israel, and I'm flying backwards and forwards. So one of the ways I wanted to save money was, I thought, maybe I'll cut the chiropractor out. I feel pretty good. And so I stopped my monthly chiropractor appointments. I kept flying backwards and forwards to London to do this course. And at the end of it, I noticed I didn't have any pain. So not only had I'd stopped all the treatments that I thought were, you know, crucial to me being healthy, but flying, you know, long flights, you know, staying with friends, you know, spending lots of time in airports and stuff like that, they're all the kind of things that would have, you know, given me a flare up. At least I thought that that's, you know, why I was having all this pain, because of my circumstances. And it hadn't happened. In fact, I can remember sitting here and like kind of checking in with my back, and I thought, I feel stronger than I have in years, like since I was a teenager, since all that stuff happened. And I haven't had any pain now, not a real flare up, in 6 or 7 years, which I find is still, I still find like a miracle. It blows my mind. And all the other stuff too, the IBS and the eczema, and you know, has all gone away. So when I realized that had happened because my thinking had slowed down, which is what I'd been learning in this course, I think it was kind of giving a break to my nervous system. You know, after decades of my nervous system being revved up on hyper alert, you know, very wary, very jumpy about noises, and especially footsteps behind me, because of when the guys beat me up, that was the noise that would always set me off. It could be someone jogging past me, or a kid running for a bus, and I go, you know, like this, that sound for a decade afterwards would freak me out. Because I wasn't overreacting to all these, you know, all these noises and circumstances anymore, there didn't need to be any of the pain anymore. It wasn't needed anymore, I think. And so I started working as a coach with people who had chronic pain. I mean, I'd been working with people with trauma for a long time, so I'd learned a lot about the fight or flight response. But now I'm starting to make the connection with the chronic pain, because, you know, we often say how we're always feeling our thinking. And I think for some of us, we're feeling our thinking in our bodies. And I know I was feeling all that frustration of don't make a mistake, don't let anybody know you don't know what you're doing, all that kind of pressure I was putting on myself was kind of manifesting in my back pain. So for the last, you know, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, I've been working with people who also have chronic pain that's has no medical explanation, or even if it does, you know, because even if the pain's coming from a recent injury, let's say, or God forbid, cancer or a tumor, state of mind is still going to affect how we experience that. And there's lots of science to show that if you're in a low state of mind, like I was for many, many years, we're going to feel the pain or the shock or the trauma at a much deeper intensity than if we're in a better mood. And so what I've seen is, and my whole idea about trauma has changed as well, because what I've had a lot of people say to me, oh, that's denial. If you're not feeling it, thinking it, going back into the past and analyzing it, you're in denial. I'm like, I did plenty of that. And in a low mood, it was a disaster, right? But now I can look back to what happened to me, like I'm telling the story now, and from a better mood, from a nicer state of mind, I can remember that stuff with understanding and compassion. Even even the guys who hurt me, I don't have any resentments at them anymore. It's like, I think they didn't know me. It was, none of them. It wasn't personal. What I think what was going on for me is I couldn't understand why me? Why did this happen to me? And even those thoughts now, I can just see them go by, and I haven't had a thought like that in years. I'm very aware of what happened. I'm not in denial about it, but from a better place, it's just part of my story now. It's just part of my history, and so it doesn't hurt me anymore to talk about it or think about it. I feel free of it, and I'm so grateful for that, because for a very long time I wasn't, and I've talked to many people who are still stuck in the story, and I think that was the beginning of my recovery from it, was when I started seeing that I'm not the story, that what happened to me is not who I am. And I've gone on and had a wonderful, very blessed life since then, and I'm so happy to share that with other people and watch them get well as well. So there you go.
That's very kind. Thanks very much, Hannah. And as if by magic, a question has popped up just as you were coming towards the end there. So the question is, how did you adapt your chronic pain with your mental pain? So I don't know if you need any more detail on that, or whether that's enough to talk to.
I'm curious what the person means by adapt. I mean, like, how do I see it go together?
Yeah, probably how the two things worked in tandem with each other, potentially. Right. What the linkage might have been.
Yeah, I think, that's a great question, because I think they're very much connected. I mean, they were for me anyway. I think, like, from what I know now, especially from all the trauma counselling training that I got, is that the fight or flight response is designed to last for about 20 minutes. It's if we have an injury, an emergency, like, God forbid, the house is burning, or car accident, whatever it is, something in our workplace, then the brain, when it senses that danger, pushes a whole bunch of cortisol, adrenaline, and glucose into the system to help us survive. It's sending all that blood to your thigh muscles to run, or your arms to fight, and that's normal and natural. Like, thank God we have that, because that's what helps us survive. And I remember when I was doing some training here, because in Israel we have sadly we have a lot of trauma, a lot of terrorist attacks. And I'm actually trained as a first responder in a unit called the Psychotrauma and Crisis Unit. I'll be honest, I haven't been on that many calls, because my Hebrew is embarrassingly bad, even though I've lived here many years. And in an emergency situation, you really need to be able to speak clearly, and my Hebrew kind of goes out my head. But for example, I remember my first call I ever went on was a baby CPR. I mean, can you imagine seeing paramedics working on your baby? It's, so people if you've called the emergency number, there's usually a lot of trauma involved. So what I learned on that course was, this lasts for 20 minutes, and then it takes about 72 hours for all those stress chemicals to, dissolve out of your body. And then in 72 hours, you're ready to face that next emergency, or that tiger that's going to chase you. And I remember when I heard that, I thought most of my clients, including me when I was, in my dark places, I wasn't stressed for just 20 minutes. Most people who are experiencing PTSD are stressed for 2 hours, 4 hours, 8, 16, 18 hours a day after day. It's not just limited to some convenient 20 minutes. And so I remember thinking straight away, like, what is that doing to the body? Because if your body is designed to, for it be to 20 minutes, maximum, let's say an hour, every few days, and we're in it constantly, then that is going to do stress and damage to all kinds of systems in our bodies, which is why people who've been in anxiety for a long time often have stomach problems, because if you're in fight or flight, it actually shuts down the digestive system. Because if you're running for your life, you don't need to be digesting lunch, right? So that's a luxury. So the brain shuts down digestion, which is why people often have, gut and stomach problems when they're in stress. It shuts down fertility, because making babies is a luxury if you're running for your life. So people often have fertility problems. It shuts down parts of the brain, and I've learned that these are all temporary things. So if anybody's listening, please don't think don't be too alarmed. It shuts down things like creativity and forward planning, because if you're running for your life, those are also luxuries, because it wants you to focus on finding the exit, getting out of that car, like whatever it is that the emergency situation you're in. So when I look back and I think about how my mental state was very much constantly in stress and constantly in worry, anxiety, either remembering what had happened to me in the past or what if, about the future, that was constantly sending danger messages to my brain. So then my brain is like kind of then tricked into thinking I'm in danger, and then putting the fight or flight response into action over and over again, and living in that place. It makes so much sense to me now why the chronic pain developed as a result of my mental state. It was like a snowball, it's a vicious cycle. But the good news about that is that it can also work the other way and unwind. My health is amazingly great today. So it repaired itself. The body is full of intelligence to repair itself, and also the mind repairs itself. I've gotten, I'm not that broken, damaged person I thought I was. I've come back to good health, thank God. Yeah.
There's some interesting stuff in there. So you say that there's that linkage between the two, and there's a sort of self-perpetuating element of the pain reminding you to be vigilant, and the vigilance reminding you that if you're not, you might end up back in pain, and it sort of goes round and round in circles. I'm guessing that despite the fact that was over a protracted period of time, that there were periods where you weren't aware that you were in pain, and you weren't particularly being hypervigilant as well, which I think speaks back to what you're saying about the body that and system that we're operating, or is operating us, has its ability to reset itself when we forget about all of that stuff. I think that that's a lovely thing to be able to explain to people. I don't know if there's anything you want to say to that, but we've got another question. If not,
no, go ahead.
Cool. So the next question. I hear so much about PTSD and triggers. What shifted your triggers?
Oh, good one. I actually don't like the word trigger. For a long time, that word bothered me, and it took me a while to work out why it bothered me. I couldn't put my finger on it, and then I thought, oh, I know what it is. Triggered, and this is just me. I'm not saying it's a rule or anything. It's just what made sense to me. For the longest time, I thought the reason I was feeling how I was, the reason I was messed up, the reason I was miserable, the reason my life was not going anywhere, was because of what happened to me. It's their fault. It's the situation's fault. It's my mother's fault. It's politics, the weather, you name it. It's somebody else's fault of why, me, this poor innocent victim who hadn't done anything wrong. Can you get the violin out? And so that's what, I've learned to call an outside-in explanation of how I felt. It's the outside stuff was causing my misery. And with that belief system, I've got a lot of work to do to control and change my outside circumstances. And, I did move a few times, like moving down to London was one way to do with it. And then, then I moved to America, and then I moved here, that we call those geographics, like thinking if I go somewhere else, then it'll be better. And I can remember going to California. Actually, when I still lived in Manchester, I went to visit the singer from my punk rock band. He was living in LA at the time. So I went to visit him because I was convinced that sunshine and palm trees will fix it. You know, how can you be miserable if you're living on the beach and there's the Pacific Ocean and, like, you know, right? So I can remember going to visit him. I was there for 6 weeks, I think, the first time I went to LA. And I sat on the beach in my leather jacket with my mug of tea, growling at all those beach bunnies with their perfect teeth, you know. I was like hating everybody. And now I see that, you know, I took my thinking with me, like the sunshine and palm trees did not fix it, I can tell you. And there's plenty of people who live in Hawaii and California who are not happy. Because as long as I think something on the outside is triggering, you know, my reaction, I see now that that's a misunderstanding. Now, for sure, my body has reflexes. Everybody does, you know, like if you put your hand on a hot something, you pull your hand away, that's a reflex. So you could call that a trigger, you know, it's triggering a response. But in terms of emotional stuff, I stopped like using the word trigger because I started to see it wasn't the outside stuff that was causing my discomfort. Even the muggings, the violence I went through, that wasn't happening anymore. So where I am right now, I'm safe. And it's only my thinking about it, my memories that I was bringing, you know, dredging up all the time. That was what was making me feel miserable and uncomfortable. And that's what was sending messages to my brain that I was in danger. So the triggers, for me, I didn't actually have to shift or change them. This understanding that I started getting, and started to just see that that wasn't, if that's not what's causing, you know, my misery, my discomfort, and it was actually my thinking about those things, that kind of shifted me from being a victim. Because I think up to that point, I always felt like, I mean, I never called myself a victim because that'd be a bit, that's weak. I never saw myself as weak, you know, but because like I'm strong and I'm surviving and I can do this, you know. I was more of the like martyr kind of like survivor warrior type, you know, and I was like, God damn it, I'm not going to let these, you know, this get me down. But inside, absolutely terrified, you know. And it's funny, like it's only been the last, even recently, seeing how anxious I really was because I was kind of in warrior mode most of the time, and I'm actually tall. I'm 5'11", so if I put shoes on, I'm 6 foot. So I'm like, you know, I could, you know, no one's gonna get me. And but inside, my thinking was so nervous all the time, terrified about what you thought of me. Was I gonna make a mistake? You know, and so it was. I think all that self-help stuff, like I said, I got very vigilant about my interior thinking, but that was just keeping the pain going. So now I don't see that I need to control and change my circumstances for me to be okay. And I can even have some grumpy, miserable thinking, and I'm still okay. You know, so it's a freedom to not be a victim to those things that, you know, whether you call them triggers or not. I just, you know, they're not what are creating my experience, so they're kind of off the hook, you know. So
no, that's cool. Right? There's logic to the assumption that there are things that trigger us because, you know, that's the general perception of how the world works. You know, we become victims to circumstance. That, you know, that's how the majority of the world sees things. What we're saying in this conversation actually is it's flipped on its head, and we're experiencing our thinking 100% of the time, and therefore, as you're saying, the triggers are let off the hook. We're no longer needing to dodge them. We're aware that we may have some thinking about them, but it's our relationship with the thought rather than the thing, and that is a complete game changer, as you know, as you've noticed in your journey. You know, I think one thing that comes out in your books and is really quite clear is that, you know, the course that you did, the studying you did, had nothing to do with pain at all.
right.
Nothing, you know, it's not even mentioned, it's not discussed. It's just a byproduct of the understanding that you were learning, that your relationship with pain and things changed without you even being aware of it. And I think, you know, that's what this whole conversation is about. That's what, you know, the three of us are trying to do with Missing in Action, is just subtly try and point people in a different direction than they may have been looking so far, in the hope that they will then see something fresh.
Yeah, you just reminded me. I had an insight not long ago, a new insight about the trauma part of it, actually, because I live in the center of the city, and there's a beautiful big park near where I live, and I often go walking there. And I remember I was walking early one morning, and it's people are out jogging, before they go to work, and people are exercising and stuff. And I was walking just, on my own, just, being okay, and enjoying the flowers and the trees, and being in the moment. And all of a sudden, two men came up from behind me jogging, and they were I could hear them talking as they're coming, and I didn't even think anything at first. But then they separated and went around me and carried on jogging. And it all came back. And this was like maybe a year ago, I think. It's just 30 years after, what happened to me. And I felt my nervous system like jump a little bit. And then I started thinking, I shouldn't be feeling like this. It's been 30 years. I'm a trauma coach. I'm a Three Principles practitioner. I shouldn't be having this. And then I could hear myself reacting. And then I had this beautiful insight. I thought, here I am. I live in a country where English is not the first language, although it's spoken a lot, thank God for my sake. But it's, Hebrew is the first language. Now, if I were walking in the park and I heard someone speaking in a Manchester accent, for example, that would also get my attention, because it's part of my story. It's part of my history, So the fact that the sound of the footsteps, especially them going around me like that, I suddenly saw it's not a bad thing. It's just part of my story. Like being English, living in a foreign country, like, if I heard a Manchester accent, I also would look around like, who's that? Maybe I know them, So it kind of put what was such a toxic, powerful thing in its place. And I don't say that to diminish anybody's suffering or, what anybody's been through. I've talked to people who've been through far worse things than I did. But when I saw that I don't know, it just kind of like, it kind of downgraded it. I don't know how else to say it. It just felt like, and and I haven't had it since, and that's one of the things I love about, like you were saying about not needing to work on stuff, since I had that insight that, it's just part of my story. It's, I'm not, not denying it. I'm not exaggerating it. It's just, it happened. And it did shape a lot of my life, but, it was what it was. And right here, right now, I'm safe. I'm okay. And thank God. And so I don't know. I didn't have to work on it. It melted away when I saw the truth that it was, now it's only ever thought when it comes up, and that can't hurt me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And it's something that, I see quite a lot with the veterans that I'm speaking to as well. They will judge themselves on the fact that they've got some razor sharp reactions to certain things. Well, no, that reaction's there for a purpose. It's trying to protect you in that moment. And all our job is to go, okay, is it spotting something that's real at the moment? Do I need to follow up on this, or is it just a slightly trigger happy? There's the word again. Slightly overexcited alarm system that's going off. That actually, no, we're all right. It's just gone off a little bit too acutely than it might necessarily need to. And thank you very much for showing up. But we're good. We're good to walk on by. Thanks.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, they may have just disappeared down a rabbit hole of, well, this, I shouldn't be like this, this is, whatever the story is that they want to put around that. It is something that's so common that people experience, not understanding that actually, one, it's trying to do them a favor, it's trying to protect them and keep them safe. And once they've realized that actually, no, I am safe, that's it. Alarm system turned off. It's done its job, and we can carry on with the day and go and have a cup of tea.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I remember, one of my teachers, Dr. Bill Pettit, who's a psychiatrist, and he started out as a surgeon during Vietnam, and I I remember he explained to me the physiology of a flashback, which I thought was, you know, fascinating. He said a flashback will last 3 minutes. Like the physiology of a flashback, like by the time you've had the whatever, you know, whatever reason it started for, and passing through your brain, you know, the neurons firing, whatever, blood pressure changing. If you don't have a reaction to it, it only lasts 3 minutes. And now 3 minutes, when you're in it, 3 minutes can seem like a long time, but we know when we're in a good place that 3 minutes isn't that long and it's going to end. When you know something's going to end, then you can kind of like stay as centered as possible. And so his word was, if you don't feed it or fight it, it'll come to an end and move on. And I know I've spoken to people who, once they know that, and you know, still have some flashbacks, but it changes the experience completely, because when you don't know how it works and you don't know what's happening, and you get more scared, like you were saying, like, and then the story starts of like, oh my gosh, this is happening again, and this is like my life now, and you know, why is this happening to me? Then that's going to send more danger signals, and it could last for, you know, 10 minutes, you know, 20 minutes, half an hour, while you're in that horrible place. So knowing that it has a short time limit, if I don't feed it or fight it, makes it much less frightening. And so the less frightened I am of it, then the smaller the amount of time it's going to impact, you know, be in my life. And I've known people who've had terrible flashbacks, and they've gone now because they've learned not to react to them. And it's, you know, the nervous system is just kind of like, it's melted away. It's amazing. We can heal from that too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Another thing that Bill said around the whole flashback thing is, as well as, again, it's there trying to serve us. It's trying to help us out in a way. And as it's a slightly person back to front system in that sense, but actually they tend to show up when people are feeling in a state of stress in the current moment. Something is going on in their life that they're finding quite stressful, and actually the replaying of something horrendous from the past is actually not to say, oh, and by the way, here, have some more crap. It's actually saying, look, you've really coped with stress in the past. You've got through that in the past. You can absolutely get through what's going on now. It's just that we don't have a manual that explains all of that for us. And I think that's one of the wonderful things that Bill does. You know, is bring what's really quite an in-depth, complicated medical subject into sort of real layperson's language for us to be able to understand.
Yeah, because when I worked in Hollywood, I was doing special effects, and people often ask me, how did you go from working in, you know, movies to like coaching people with pain? And so, like, a flashback is, like, I remember Bill saying, it's thought with special effects. Right? So my job in Hollywood, I was known for making animatronics, like creatures, puppets, specifically copies of real animals. So if there was a movie that had an animal in it that had to talk, or, you know, get run over by a truck or something, we'd make a copy of exactly that animal, and then they would cut from my puppet to the real thing, and you won't know the difference. And so my whole career was about convincing you that that things were real that weren't, right? You know, like a dog can talk, you know? And so our minds have a brilliant special effects department, far better than anything, you know, me or Steven Spielberg could come up with, right? And so, I mean, how many times have you thought something is, you know, real when really it was just you know, like a shadow, or you know? In fact, I remember when I first moved into this apartment, and my kitchen's over here, and I've got I bought one of those water filter jug things, you know, and I can remember I was sitting here at the computer, and I could hear this awful noise. It sounded like an animal dying. And I thought, there's no animals in here. And then I thought, and I literally thought, like, maybe it's a creature, like, oh, like an alien. I know, it sounded so awful. And all it was the water jug. The filter wasn't in straight. And so the air was kind of like escaping around the sides of it and making these horrible noises. But it was amazing how my mind went into this thing of like, there's an alien in my house. You know, it's like, real. I think I'm pretty, straightforward kind of person. And now I'm thinking aliens, like, I don't even watch science fiction movies, but, so the special effects that are going on in our mind. And so when we do get, stressed and maybe a flashback, maybe, like memories are coming up about the past. And then if I sort of listen to those thoughts, and then that starts my blood pressure going up a little bit, and then my heart starts getting faster, and then my hands are shaking. Well, it must be real. Look, my hands are shaking. It's really happening. And all that was because of a overreaction, like that jumpiness, like you were saying, to the natural stuff that, like a flashback, like I said, is happening to, it's part of the system. And it's just, maybe overreacting a little bit too much because I've been feeding it. When I learned to stop feeding it, it just, like a cat, like if you don't feed a stray cat, it goes away. And it's incredible how we can heal from that. And so the special effects department in my mind has gotten, hasn't had a lot of chance to do much in the last few years because it's, it's not employed anymore.
It's good to hear. Yeah, it's again, it's an amazingly clever system. So people will be aware of feeling unsteady when they're stood up high somewhere. That sort of vertigo, fear of heights business, which is again designed on purpose to just make us slow down a little bit. Be careful, because if you make a mistake up here, you might fall off and hurt yourself.
Right.
Well, that when it's explained like that, it makes sense why we might feel a bit wobbly, even though nothing's different from walking on the ground. And then there's nothing to fear at that stage other than, okay, just be gentle, take it steadily. Whereas what people tend to do is, oh, I don't cope well with heights because I feel wobbly when I go up there.
Right.
Everybody does. And those who don't are more likely to hurt themselves. So it's fascinating exploring things that we've been so sort of wedded to or stuck on completely innocently in our lives, and see how we might be able to see them differently. And again, that's the beauty of the conversation that we're all part of and that we're trying to share with the world at the moment. So that's really cool.
Yeah, nice.
Chana,
yeah.
Say, I mean, our audience, we hope, is obviously military and first responder based, and a fair few of those have had trauma, and maybe they've been diagnosed with trauma, PTSD, and maybe even then years and years have gone on, and they've got maybe chronic fatigue or something along those lines, or pains, fibromyalgia, or even just really bad back pains, joint pains, etc., etc. What would you recommend they do to start to find less pain, to find a life that's moved on, like you have?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I always say to people is make sure you get checked out, that by a doctor, that, that there isn't something, organic or biological that's causing, the pain or the discomfort, because we don't want to miss something. But once, and actually, I actually did a course about a year ago with a mind-body medicine doctor to help. It was for practitioners like me who work with people with pain. There were a lot of chiropractors and physiotherapists who were doing the course to help someone work out whether it's mind-body, like a stress-related thing, or whether it is an organic thing. And I mean, obviously it's, a very broad subject, but very briefly, things like if the pain comes and goes, that's usually a clue that it's a stress-related thing, because if it was an organic thing, like God forbid, a tumor or something, then the pain would probably be more consistent. Or sometimes with chronic pain, it moves around the body. Like I used to have this really weird nerve pain in my toes on my left foot, but sometimes it would come in my right foot. right? And sometimes people like have, like a pain or a paralysis or numbness down one side of the body. And the doctor explained if there was something going on with the nerves, it wouldn't be all down one side of the body. It would be in certain places, So, and like I was told that the sciatica pain that I always had going down my leg was because of, I have one leg longer than the other, just slightly. And so my pelvis is slightly slanted. And so that made my lower back unstable. Well, I still have one leg longer than the other. My pelvis is still slightly slanted and I don't have any pain. And I believe it's because I believe all my pain and all those other physical things as well. Like people can get skin problems, migraines, all kinds of things can happen through stress-related stuff. That mine went away when I started to see the truth about the nature of thought, that thought is always moving. And because I would always feel stuck in these repetitive thoughts, the what happened to me would like repeat and repeat and repeat in my head. And when I saw that that's actually an illusion, that thought is always moving, it's fluid. So people say, yeah, but no, it's stuck. My thinking is really stuck. And so one of the analogies I've come up now with that is like, think of a TV show that you've seen maybe a few times, like, I don't know if it's Seinfeld or Friends or something, like a TV show that's been on many times. That episode, was recorded back in 1990, whatever it was. And the first time we saw it was probably on a television. And then the second time you saw it might have been on a DVD. And the next time you saw it might have been on Netflix, So it's moving through, like I guess other people can see like these words that are going across the bottom of the screen, that the same message is going across, but every time any of us read it or see it, it's different because that was a few seconds ago and now I'm a different, it can be different in any moment. In fact, I remember there's a quote, I can't remember if it's Plato or Aristotle or one of those guys, who said, a man cannot step in the same river twice. Right? If you think about it, if you think of a river near you, if you were to go to it, 10 times, every time it's going to be a different river. So when I started seeing that the nature of thought is always moving and there's always possibility of fresh new thought, that when I started seeing fresh new thought, my nervous system started getting the message I was safe. So I would recommend to anybody to, get in contact with you guys, talk to someone who understands how this works. And it just started to help me to settle down. And once I saw that my pain was not coming from something organic, like I always thought it was coming from my injuries. But another thing I learned was that all injuries heal, right? Under normal circumstances, all injuries heal within 4 to 6 weeks. So that was my first insight. How come I'm having pain 25 years after my injuries must have healed? So that also showed that it was coming from something other than the physical stuff. It was coming from an emotionally creative. My brain was interpreting it into pain. So I would say that the more I look in this direction, and like I said, the less I became a victim of what happened, and the safer I began to feel. Then the pain went away, because the pain was really a signal to get my attention, to get me to slow down. And once I slowed down, then it wasn't needed anymore, and it just kind of melted away. So I hope that that's helpful.
Yeah, massively. Yeah. And we do have a question, and I've just muted itself. So I've got one from Kevin, who says, "Hi Hannah, I'm a veteran seriously injured in Iraq." And it's not a question, but he says he can really relate to your story because he lives with chronic pain daily. So it's great to know that he can see that as well. And
I would say to him, the pain is real. Like when we're saying that that it's a mind-body thing or it's coming from stress, it doesn't mean you're making it up, right? You're not imagining it. I used to feel like my pelvis had been hit with a baseball bat. I can remember gasping for breath sometimes when I'd have back spasms. You know, I passed out at work one time. I was rushed off to the emergency room from a movie set because the pain was so bad in my back. You know, he's, you know, Kevin, I want to tell you that you're not making it up. You're not imagining it. But it can go away, because when I started seeing that, like I said, is it real? Because there's no such thing as real pain and imagined pain. It's all the same, whatever it's coming from. But when I saw it was coming from this cycle I'd gotten into of stressful thinking that was aggravating my nervous system, and like it is a vicious cycle. And the good news is it can go in the opposite direction too, that it can calm down. And I've worked with people now. I wish I could just sprinkle fairy dust on everybody just gets well as soon as they get these ideas. It's not really like that. But I have seen people have insights where the pain has left, you know, within minutes, sometimes weeks and days. I've had people with fibromyalgia, which for some reason seems to take a lot longer. But because their mental state is better, because they're understanding how experience is created, when they do have pain, it's not such a big deal anymore. And I've got a client with fibromyalgia. She was in so much pain for 5 years. She couldn't even sit in a restaurant for a meal long enough, you know, because it was too painful. She couldn't even sit in our sessions, you know, she'd have to lie down. And now she's running, you know, and for a long time she'd have to rest after the runs, you know, and now she can run in the morning and she doesn't need to rest anymore. She still has some muscle pain, but her mental state is so good now that she doesn't even mention it anymore. It's not who she is. You know, my pain was my identity for a long time. I was the girl who'd been mugged 3 times. And it's just not the case anymore. So, there's hope. There's always hope. Yeah.
I think that's key, isn't it? Because a lot of people are told you're going to suffer like this for the rest of your life, or you know, you're not going to be able to do this, you're not going to be able to do that, and that's not necessarily true, is it?
Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something. There was something in what you said about the special effects in our mind that come to mind to me. Like if you're asleep in the middle of the night and you hear a bang in the house, you immediately go to who's that or what's that, and then say you get out of bed and you're curious about it rather than judgmental about it. Investigate it. You then work out, oh, that's fell off the side because I know that I put that up on there and that's what's made the noise. Immediately you're at ease.
Yeah. And
it's like a calmness washes over you.
Yeah.
And that must be exactly the same as what you're talking about. It's once you understand it, then your body reacts in a different way, you know.
Totally.
Fascinating.
It is. And I can remember when I first came around the 3 principles, I heard teachers or practitioners saying, like, imagine a lion walked into the room, you know, we'd all be terrified. And then you found out it's a puppet, right? And I'm like, I made a lion for a movie. Right? I've got pictures I can show you. Right? George of the Jungle. If you ever saw George of the Jungle, I made the lion for that. And then I remember somebody else said, like, imagine a tiger walked in the room. We'd all be like screaming and running. I'm like, I made a tiger, a puppet. I made for Dr. Dolittle. Right? So, like, and I remember when I made that tiger, you know, and people would, like, if they didn't know, they'd go, right? It's a puppet. It was made out of rubber and fur and, you know, metal and, you know, plaster and glue and stuff. And so when you understand, it takes so much of the fear out of it. You know, when you know it's a shadow, there's nothing to be frightened of. And sometimes, you know, we do get caught up, like when I did with those guys that were jogging around me. But as soon as I saw that I was just experiencing my thinking about it, not, you know, and I wasn't in any danger, my nervous system settled down straight away. You know, there was no need for it to keep going anymore. And I think it was just like a very human reaction. You know, like if you hear a noise in the middle of the house, in the middle of the night in your house, it's a normal reaction to wonder what it is. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I've just learned not to, you know, blow it out of proportion and then, you know, be up all night terrified with a knife under my pillow, you know, which I have, you know, been in those kind of states in the past, and it just doesn't occur to me anymore. So, yeah. That's great.
Well, thank you very much, Hannah. That was amazing, and we're almost at time, and I think that's almost a sort of perfect place to leave it as well. That last piece you said, where it's a very human reaction, and once you have understanding about why the reaction appeared and the fact that we're okay now, it just melts away again. And that's that hope that we're all pointing towards. It's amazingly simple. And wonderfully accessible to anybody, and that's the point that we're trying to raise here. I just want to say thank you to everybody that turned up to listen. That's been amazing. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much to you, Hannah, because I'm aware that it is now 11 p.m. for you in Jerusalem, and that's a long old stint. So thank you very much indeed. And we'll be back next month, we hope, with Bill Pettit. We haven't actually asked him yet. So that's the plan, is we're going to try and get Bill. If not, we'll see who else we can find. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody. It's been really, really cool. Paul, is there anything that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, just a massive thank you to Hannah.
Pleasure. Really nice to agree with you guys.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
And it's
Thank
also
you very much.
Thanks. As well.
Okay.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.